Hello everyone, this is Pal Ponder on Weather. In this update, we've got a massive storm coming with some intense winds and tornadoes possible. Plus, flooding is another huge concern in the week ahead, and the tropics are really starting to get active. Welcome back everyone, how's it going? This is your weekend update. Hope everyone is having a fabulous weekend out there. If you are new to the channel and you like detailed weather breakdowns on the US and the tropics, hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to the satellite picture this morning, and you can tell you what I'm really concerned about is this upper level low traversing across portions of the Dakotas. That's really going to have a lot of lift to it and explode thunderstorms in the heat of the day. And so that's why the Storm Prediction Center does have a slight risk for severe weather with these storms breaking out later on this afternoon into portions of Minnesota. That'll fishtail down into Iowa, getting back into Wisconsin. We've got another flare-up of storms going to be activated in portions out here in West Texas, while the Gulf is just open for business with a relentless amount of moisture that's going to be feeding into some of these storms. So yes, like I mentioned, we do have that slight risk for severe storms this afternoon for portions of Minnesota back into Iowa, getting into Wisconsin. That is kind of your main bullseye, if you will. The main impact for these intense winds and some tornadoes are going to be possible within this sector, because the tornado parameters are actually about double than what they were hinting at yesterday. So those storms were really packing a punch yesterday. I think even these are going to be a little bit more intense, and some of these can be rotating. So tornadoes is definitely another huge concern later on this afternoon, right across this bullseye into portions of central and southern Minnesota, especially getting into Iowa. So I expect them to probably extend the tornado risk further south into Iowa later on this afternoon. That'll eventually head into portions of Wisconsin. So you live in this area, you need to be on high alert, because we're talking about all three modes of severe weather, and including with these updrafts. Here's the maximum updraft velocity. Now we're talking about a large hail producers as well, and some of these could be on the form of those 2-inch or greater potential hail. So it's been a while since we've talked about this with some really intense winds with all three modes of severe weather, including your potential tennis ball, maybe even baseball size hail in some of these isolated storms, and then even tornadoes. So definitely it's been a while since we talked about all three of those aspects. But unfortunately, yes, we're going to be possibly hit hard later on this afternoon during the peak heating hour. So definitely be on high alert of these potential storms heading your way later on this afternoon. And here's the overall radar setup kind of over the next 18 hours where this display is. So I feel we're going to have some storms breaking out along this boundary here in far west Texas. The main sector is going to be up here right along this upper level low here, traversing across the Dakotas, but especially really start to get activated once it hits into Minnesota and then Wisconsin, and that'll swing across into portions of Iowa, and then eventually into the overnight hours will swing into portions of Illinois. And then you have the southern flow here with the Gulf open for business, with some diurnal heating type thunderstorms. And then of course down into Florida, you got all those thunderstorms activity in the heat of the day. So if we move on to tomorrow, it's right along that boundary. This doesn't really move that far. So we're still in this kind of zone here into portions that will eventually get into Michigan. That'll swing across into Illinois, into Indiana and Ohio. I do expect them to at least upgrade this to at least a slight risk for tomorrow as well by the time we get to tomorrow, with a lot of the parameters that I'm definitely looking at it. Because another concern is some of these intense winds racing across. So here's kind of gives you an example of where the winds are going to be over the next 48 hours. So definitely whenever you see these kind of ribs showing up on some of these radar maps, hey, that's definitely an indicative some powerful winds to be coming across this boundary here. So once we get in the afternoon hours, we're going to have the intense winds into portions of the Dakotas, getting into Minnesota. But definitely once we get into Illinois, get into Indiana and Ohio, a good chunk of this will be later on today, but especially into tomorrow and to Monday, and along this boundary with that cold front that's going to be sagging southward through the midsection of the country. So by the time we get into Monday night time frame, it could be setting up over here into portions of Kansas, Missouri, southern Illinois, got back into Indiana, and then I'll eventually head into Oklahoma and along into the Texas Panhandle as well. So yeah, if we take an account of all the 48 hours of the next 2 days on where the active weather is going to be, it's essentially off this boundary here off West Texas. The monsoonal flow is still there, but not as alive and prevalent as it has been. There's the main system coming across the upper Midwest, and then as this swings across and as that cold front moves further southward, it's going to bring all the instability along with it. So we'll have some scattered activity along the baseline here with this stalled cold front out in the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. So things could get interesting there as well, as a lot of a flare-up of a convection down into the Gulf of Mexico. But over the next 5 days, here's kind of an overall summary and how this is all going to unfold. So yeah, we've got the ridge of high pressure pretty much locked and loaded over the west and the northwest and up into Canada. That's a lot of heat. They've been dealing with a lot of heat, and you got a lot more heat coming with this a little bit of a trough that's going to be digging down here into the northeast areas. Going to bring a little bit of a cool down for them. Not much, but definitely some cooler conditions for them. But you see all this white kind of showing up on the map. We've got stalled frontal boundaries. We've got cold fronts moving across, and really the more unsettled weather, the more instability is going to be down here into Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, back into Georgia, into Florida, as well as the Carolinas as well. So those are the more favored areas to have all the instability, and the heavier rains are going to be coming up in a couple days, really kind of along that boundary there. So let's take a look at the overall setup going beyond that as far as like the temperatures goes, and it really kind of displays on where that ridge is. That's underneath all that is all the heat. So yeah, we've all that red and the deeper browns here. That is some really, well above average heat going to be locked over California, over the Northwest, over Canada. We see that slight cool down for the Northeast and the Ohio Valley. But all that instability down here into Texas is implying the only way you get below average in Texas, basically in August, is cloud cover and rain. And that's insinuating we could be looking at some really heavy rain setting back over portions of Texas, with a combination of the cold front that's going to be coming across. The Gulf of Mexico is open for business, and the little flare up of activity in the Gulf of Mexico that we're going to be talking about now. This is satellite picture right now. So what this is basically like an old frontal boundary, right? So it's a stalled front, and typically, this time of year, this is typically what you would see if you have some sort of, like, say, tropical storm type development. But I'm not really concerned about this developing into a tropical type system, but what it's going to be able to do is going to be able to feed and pull up all that warm, just open for business Gulf of Mexico sea surface temperatures, and just dump it into Texas, basically. I mean, Texas has been, in a severe drought. They've had a lot of help in the last week or two, and they're going to get a lot more help with everything that's going to be on the table in the coming days. So really concerned about Tuesday. So what we've been seeing is these intense, like really intense water precipitable value index. So what that means is what the atmosphere is capable of if they've got the dynamics and the lift in place. When you start seeing parameters of over 3.4 inches per hour, we've been getting to these incredible rainfall rates. We saw it in St. Louis. We've seen it in, say, Death Valley. We saw it in Eastern Kentucky. I mean, Dallas broke the all-time record in 1 hour for rainfall rate. Austin broke it. So we're getting these more intense rainfalls. That's why these amounts are getting higher, because the atmosphere is saying, hey, it's maxed out at 100% capability. Going into Tuesday, the parameters, climatologically speaking, is about 95% again. So it takes, 5% only this can happen. And so, but it's showing that it's happened numerous times in the last couple of weeks. So we could be looking at another very heavy rain setup in isolated parts, just kind of isolated. It's not for everybody. It's just the areas that could set up into portions of East Texas heading into Tuesday with this cold front, right? So we're going to have a cold front that's going to be moving down from the south, but it's going to be slowing in speed, right? But the Gulf of Mexico is open for business, and then you got a little squeeze play action happening. So once that squeeze place, then it just rings out the atmosphere. And then you get these storms that just don't sit anywhere because they get this boundary with these upper level winds aloft that they don't have much movement to it. So these are isolated in nature. I actually saw this yesterday by my house. It rained like 3 inches in about an hour and 15 minutes, but 3 miles away, I got a 1/4 inch, right? I mean, but the atmosphere was capable of producing over 3-inch rainfall rates. And that's what's going to happen again heading up on Tuesday into portions of East Texas, right? So yeah, definitely flooding is another concern coming up by the midweek. So beyond that, once we hit the first week of September, here's the overall aspect. Again, yeah, we got another ridge moving back into the Pacific Northwest. The heat's not going away anytime soon, unfortunately, for if you live out west and you live out northwest. But the ridge is going to be building across the top. It's going to be building across the top, and I think that's one of the reasons why the tropics are starting to get more activity out there. It's starting to kind of wake up after it's been so, such a gap in activity as of late. But as far as the temperature is concerned, yeah, we're still looking at well above average temperatures for much of the Pacific Northwest and much of the West. Those above average temperatures will start to build back in to portions of the Ohio Valley and the Northeast and the first week of September. And then you have all that instability underneath with all the cooler conditions, complements of all the rain and the cloud cover around. So but the highest probability of rain chances in the first week of September are really going to be along this boundary here into Texas and Louisiana and the Mississippi and then Alabama back into Florida. You're going to be pretty much dry with that ridge in place that first week in September, with just all that ridge and that sinking air and all the substance air, over the top. So all the instability is going to be further south in the southern states. And we'll be having to watch the tropics because a lot of activity is going to be heading up from the Caribbean. So let's head to the tropics, right? So yeah, we haven't seen this in a long time. In fact, we haven't seen it all year. We got 4 spots to watch. We've been watching this spot in the Caribbean for several days. But this is the main concern out here. Now it has a 70% chance of development, and a lot of computer models, a lot of activity, a lot of ensemble members have this developing into our next tropical type system, and we have other ones back behind it. So we got 4 areas of concern, but the one nearest land is this feature right here that has a 20% probability. So, but going forward, it's like I said, it's been since Colin since we've had a named storm. In fact, today's the 28th when I'm redoing this video, so we're talking at 55 days. Been 55 days since we've had a tropical type system form or a named storm since Colin, which was July the 3rd. All time would be the second longest is 59 days. The all-time longest is 61 days, and that was back in 1999. What stands out to me with 1999, that was the last time we've been in a La Nina, and we're expected to be in a triple dip type La Nina coming up by this winter. And that was the last time, 99, 2000, and 2001, we had that last time we had a triple dip type La Nina. So it's kind of ironic here. We're looking at the same type of pattern here. The last time we had a triple dip in La Nina, we had such a gap in activity as far as our hurricane named storms. So going forward, here's the GFS, right? It's been the only model, really the only model, and it's still producing this storm going to be out in the Gulf of Mexico. The odds of this happening are slim to none, but it's still insisting that there's going to be a tropical named storm. The more likely aspect is that it's not going to be a named storm, but it's going to still bring some pretty heavy rains, if not flooding rains, with the combination of that cold front and that another surface low back into Texas by midweek. So I'm definitely not expecting a named storm out of this system right here. Where I am expecting a named storm, and potentially our next named storm, which would be Danielle, would be this feature out here, which is now labeled 91L. So that was the activity the National Hurricane Center has a 70% probability of forming in the next 5 days. Most guidance is pretty bullish, but like I mentioned, that first feature back into Texas, I'm not expecting a named system. but we're still going to have this vorticity around in Texas for much of the week. So there's going to be daily rain showers and storms are going to be hitting those the same areas, and we're going to be adding to the rainfall totals in Texas. There's no question about it whatsoever. If you look at it, the overall precipitation anomalies over the next 7 days, like I mentioned, I'm pretty concerned about flooding rains hitting the island Jamaica, heading into the Cayman Islands. That'll swing across into the Yucatan. It gets mixed with this stalled frontal boundary activity out here into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. And then all this moisture will be fed into Texas. So you still get rain, you get heavy rains, but I'm not expecting a named storm out of that system. Like I mentioned, where I am expecting a named storm is from that 91L. So the European model, and most models are pretty bullish on this system becoming the next named storm. In fact, let's take a look at the overall ensembles or the overall guidance of what all the models are saying. So most of them have it coming into a named storm, but most of them can continue to traverse it on the northern side of the Lesser Antilles and the northern side of Puerto Rico. So we'll definitely have to watch this, but most of these ramp up not only to a named storm, but some of them take it to a 1, 2, even a possible category 3 named storm in the days ahead. So this is going to be our next significant storm on the table. There's no question. And the one behind that is the more likely feature that could be named as well. So we've been through Alex, we've gone through Bonnie, we've been through Colin. So the next named storm would be Danielle, and then also be Earl after that. Over the next 7 to 10 days, which I'm expecting for those two to be named. So what's interesting, let's take a look at 99. So we have to take a look at this as an anomaly year because we've had that gap, and this is the longest stretch we've seen a storm in a while, matching up to 1999, but also it compares with the triple dip La Nina that we're going into this also. So even though it got off to a slower start, it still ended up with 12 named storms. Hurricane season goes all the way through the end of November, but here's the overall tracks of these storms, and it actually ended up with 8 hurricanes. We haven't had a storm, we haven't had a hurricane yet. So just because it's quiet right now, we could have an active 6 weeks or 8 weeks ahead by the time we end, heading into work, because like I mentioned, we're going to the highest probability time of year is September and October. So the most active times, 75% of the storm names are happen over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So yeah, definitely don't let your guard down. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.